Hello, everybody. We are coming to the end of the sessions that we have prepared for you today. Game days have been here in Slovakia for 6 years, and this is the first time that we decided to have a focus on a certain topic. And this year's topic and the theme of the game days is accessibility. Majority of us, me and you in the audience, we use all our senses to soak in the experience from playing the games. But not all can play same games the same way as we do. Not all can experience the visuals or play with both hands. I'm beyond happy that we have some experts here with us on accessibility. And one particular lead on inclusivity at Microsoft, who worked as well on the adaptive controller. It is my pleasure to welcome Bryce Johnson.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. Yeah, I'm the inclusive lead for Microsoft devices, so I work specifically on our hardware. There's lots of great people at Microsoft that work on all kinds of accessibility, but I get to focus on hardware, and yeah, I was fortunate enough to be one of the inventors of the Xbox Adaptive Controller. So this is the Xbox Adaptive Controller. This is what we're here to talk about today. Like, how do I design for the Xbox Adaptive Controller? And I'm going to go through that. First, I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction of how we actually designed this product. So I'm going to get to this, but I'm going to spoil it a little bit. Please don't design for the Xbox Adaptive Controller. And that's confusing to you right now, but I swear we'll get there. Has anyone seen our Super Bowl commercial? We've got it kind of playing right there in the bottom corner. When this ad was released, it was great. The reception was wonderful. It was very heartwarming to hear all the people say this. And we had this tweet from dear Miss Hashim. She said, "Today we watched and rewatched and reflected on this Microsoft commercial with first grade, and here are their thoughts. Some kids cannot change. It doesn't mean they can't play. Microsoft did not want the kids to change, so they changed the remote." Yep, that's why we did it. That's pretty much the whole development thing in a nutshell. That's why we kind of did this whole thing. And that's really an interesting place to start. So I want to start from a place where we talk about this guy. We talk about our traditional controller. I'm biased, but I think we make the greatest controllers in the world. Your opinions may vary, but I think this is the greatest controller in the world. Now, game controllers have been optimized over many generations, many, many years, around a primary use case that makes a lot of assumptions, right? Game controllers assume, and it was important for us at Microsoft to recognize that these assumptions were excluding people. So game controllers assume that you have two thumbs to use it, and you can use it on the sticks, that you have, fluid motion with those two thumbs. Game controllers assume that people have fine motor control to hit all those buttons on a controller. Does anyone know how many buttons are on a controller? He does. There's 17 buttons on a game controller, at least on an Xbox controller. 18 if you count the sync button, but I'm not going to count that one. That's more dense than a keyboard. You hit 17 buttons with 4 fingers, right? That requires a lot of fine motor control. And that was important for us to understand. Game controllers assume that people can reach those bumpers and triggers, that you hold it in a certain way. Did anyone watch like Sightless playing like KI out there a little bit earlier today? And he had the game controller on the table, because that's kind of how he plays. Like, we didn't assume that people were going to play that way. He plays that way for whatever reason, mostly awesomeness, but it was when you assume that people are going to use things a certain way and you optimize it, you can kind of limit how people use things. Another assumption that we made was that we assume that people can hold a game controller for an extended period of time. That's an important assumption of ours. And when I talk to my colleagues at Xbox, they kind of always say, like, and I'll bring this one up and I'll say, listen, it can be too heavy for some folks. And they say, well, what do you mean? I don't understand why it's too heavy. I played this thing for 15 hours on Saturday. I don't know what you're talking about. Right? Because they're going at this from their own worldview that they don't understand. So we have to kind of show them. And the way that we do that is we have a practice at Microsoft called inclusive design. And these are the principles of our inclusive design practice, right? And you can find more material up there on that URL. The first principle is recognize exclusion. Exclusion happens when we use our own biases to solve problems. And as Microsoft designers, we seek out those exclusions and use them as opportunities to create new ideas and inclusive designs. So just going through that controller thing about our traditional controller, we had to recognize that our traditional controller was over-optimized around a primary use case, and it was excluding people. That was up to us to recognize that exclusion. So the next one, learn from diversity. Human beings are the real experts in adapting to diversity. Inclusive design puts people in the center from the very start of the process, and those fresh, diverse perspectives are the key to true insight. And then the last one, solve for one, extend to many. Everyone has abilities and limits to those abilities. Designing for people with permanent disabilities actually results in designs that benefit people universally. Constraints are a beautiful thing. So I'm going to get into that second point a little bit. And I'm going to talk about how we develop the controller. So there's something that we believe at Microsoft in our process development, and we really strive to do it, even though sometimes it can be really challenging, is we believe in a phrase that the disability community has, which is nothing about us without us. It means we don't design for people with disabilities. We design with people with disabilities. It's an important distinction, right? And so it was super important to us to work with people with disabilities in the development of this controller. It took 3 years to develop this controller. And in the very beginning, we started working with Warfighter Engaged, which is that charity there on the far side there. They were our first charities. They're a charity that helps disabled veterans play video games. Then we worked with Able Gamers, Cerebral Palsy Foundation, Special Effect, and Craig Hospital. Able Gamers is the largest gaming accessibility charity in the US. Cerebral Palsy Foundation is not a gaming charity per se, but it was great to work with them on a whole bunch of stuff. Special Effect is the largest gaming accessibility charity in the UK. Craig Hospital is a spinal cord and brain injury hospital out of Denver, Colorado. And what was important for us was that we learned not only from all of these experts, because they all have similar goals, but they all have really different ways of approaching the problem and solving how they did it. So we had to create a device that not only worked for all of these people, but had to work, well for them in their practice. So in 2015, we met Josh Bryce and Warfighter Engaged. This is a video of Josh, and this is showing his setup. You can see there he's limb different. He's got an above elbow amputee on his left arm. He plays with a regular controller with his right hand, and then he uses that joystick with his sort of nub there. Has some other buttons. This was a really important sort of event for us because Josh came to visit us at Microsoft, and what it showed us was it really sort of crystallized this idea of the fact that our game controllers were excluding people because they were over-optimized. This was the genesis of, oops, I'm going to rewind that, play that again. This was the genesis of like where we sort of started on all of our stuff. This was us recognizing that we were excluding people. And this was really powerful because a lot of our executive team are veterans. They've served. And it cut through a lot of this idea of like, why should we do this? And it became more about how should we do this? So it was a very important kind of a thing. Just to give you a different example, this is Andrew Pilkington. He was referred to us by the Cerebral Palsy Foundation. So Andrew has CP. He's a pretty good Madden player. I mean, he's not the greatest, but he's pretty good. But, you can give him some, leeway because he, as you can see there, he plays with his feet. So he uses the Xbox Adaptive Controller and the bunch of buttons and Other things. Actually, I should get him some better buttons now that I look at this. I could make that setup way better for him. But he was really interesting because, again, like, he was someone who used to play when games were simpler, and modern games became too complicated for him to play, and it excluded him. And then we gave him a controller that helped him basically put a button where he had movement, and that gave him a little bit back, this ability to play modern games. Didn't give him back everything, but it gave him a little bit. All of these examples, by the way, are what I'm referring to when I talk about solve for one, extend to many. This idea of like finding people with really distinct need and unique need and understanding their need and then bringing their needs back and trying to figure out how we can create a device that helps all of them. So start off with Josh, amputee, Andrew, cerebral palsy. This is Jesse. Jesse's I think a C, I can't remember. It's either C1 or C2 quadriplegic, which means basically he can only move from the neck up, right? So he's here in a facility that we had. We have this facility that I run on at Microsoft called the Inclusive Tech Lab. And Jesse comes in, and basically he works with Caitlin there. Caitlin is a person on our team. She's actually the first occupational therapist that we've ever hired. So we hired an occupational therapist to help us sort of tackle these ideas, where occupational therapists are typically out in the world like life hacking people after the fact, like changing people's products after the fact to make them more accessible. We thought we'd bring her further upstream to help us like not design problems in the products that we create in the first place, right? So he's using what they call a quad stick. It's a mouth-operated sip and puff joystick. This one's a simple version. So that joystick goes in his mouth, and if you blow into it, it's one action, and if you suck on the tube, it's a separate action. So he's basically got one stick and two buttons. And what we've actually done with him is we actually have him playing Halo with that. And the reason why we have him, and the reason how we can have him play Halo with that, does anyone remember this idea of legacy controls in Halo? Or GoldenEye, where this idea of like up and down is moving up forward and backwards, and then left and right is aiming with one stick. So you can't strafe. You can't aim your gun up. You can only aim your gun side to side. That's what legacy controls was. So we can, through using legacy controls in Halo, we can actually have Jesse play Halo with just one mouse stick. Again, I think it's important to recognize that, what he gets out of it. So that's a bunch of extreme users. And this is a different type of user. This is my buddy Cherry Ray. She uses the adaptive controller and a feature that we have called Copilot. And what Copilot does is it allows us to take a regular controller. Well, actually, sorry. I'm going to step back for a minute. Xbox and Windows 10 don't see this any differently than this. They're both controllers. So we talked about Copilot a bit today in an earlier session. What Copilot does is it lets you take two controllers to control one character. We did that as a very early accessibility feature for someone who might not be able to move. They might have some movement in one hand, but then they could use a different controller on a different part of their body. So you can kind of see we wanted to split up those controls. It was an early foray into how we thought about controls. Now Cherry uses it with these two big buttons. And if you've seen the commercial, you may think that these are capacitive pads like on a Steam controller. I'm afraid to tell you they are not. They are big buttons. And that's really intentional, actually. Like, we didn't design these buttons for fingers. We designed these buttons for fists and elbows and feet and other kind of things. And what Cherry uses them for is Cherry has a condition that makes it really hard for her to have a lot of strength. So she finds stick presses in games really hard. And I mean, if you play any console-based games with a controller, a lot of modern games rely on stick presses, right? So she can't use the joystick and use them as a button at the same time. She doesn't have the strength. So what she does is she co-pilots a regular controller with the adaptive controller. She remaps those two big buttons to stick presses, and then she has the ability to basically just let gravity, she can just use her hands to hit these big old buttons, and that'll allow her to have a better way to control it. So it's hard for me to hold. I'm going to just put this mic down. Well, no, wait. Maybe. Yeah, I'm going to put it down. So you can see here, we purposely designed these buttons so that they could be used in conjunction with the regular controller. We want people to use these two things together if they, if that works for them. So you can just use your hand. And remember with Copilot too, who here plays first-person shooters and hates taking their fingers off the right thumbstick? Okay. Reload, 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 right? I mean, we built the Elite so that you didn't have to take your fingers off the thumbsticks. But I hate paddles. I mean, if you like paddles, cool. I'm not a fan of paddles. I don't really like them. But we built this controller so that you could change the movement, right? A lot of people use setups similar to Cherry who have RSI. So what happens is like arthritis or just sort of carpal tunnel. We talk to a lot of folks who basically, after an hour or two of playing Destiny and doing this, right, their fingers are on fire. And they tell us, they tell us how important those 2 hours of Destiny are to them, that's where their friends are, and that's where they like engage with their community. And so we want to give them more than 2 hours. So if they buy an adaptive controller, they can remap those buttons. They can change their movement. They have options that they can change the movement so that maybe they can get 3 hours, right? That's totally our whole goal. Let's see how I'm doing for time. Doing pretty good. Okay, I'm going to show this video really quick. This is Brad and Dan from a YouTube channel called All Access Life. They use Copilot for a very specific reason. Brad here has got, you see those red and green buttons that are on his head array? So he's going to hit those buttons with his head. Brad has cerebral palsy. And basically, Dan here is going to help him play because they're co-piloted together. So the two of them are playing one Fortnite character.
Access Lifers. Brad's over at my place today for a big old gaming day. We're going to be playing some Fortnite for you guys today using Brad's Xbox adaptive controller. And we'll be using an accessibility feature that Microsoft has called Copilot, which essentially allows two controllers to merge together and act as one. Let's open this up. Okay, start hitting, start hitting. Okay, hit. There he is, shoot him! Shoot him! Shoot! Yes! Yes! Oh, let's go to that one. Okay, we gotta go this one. You have to open fast. You have to open this one fast. Open, open, open. Okay, pick that up, pick that up. Okay, now get ready to shoot. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Hold out, yeah, hold it down, hold it down, hold it down. Come on, come on. Yes, yes, we got him. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I left this dancing scene in because I was just at a medical conference and it was really important for me to put that in because that's a longer story.
What's going on?
Oh, skip that. So I just want to loop back on these inclusive principles for a second and put them in context for the adaptive controller. Recognize exclusion. We recognize that our traditional game controller was excluding people unintentionally. One of the things that we say a lot in our practice is that when we do not intentionally include people, we will unintentionally exclude people. Something that we kind of believe. Learn from diversity. We engaged all across the gaming disability community, limited mobility community, I should be very specific, on the development of this device. One of the things we learned from the Cerebral Palsy Foundation was that the form of this device was really crucial. And what I mean by that is that when I first showed a sketch of this device to the head of the Cerebral Palsy Foundation, he basically talked to me for 45 minutes about why I was wrong. Because I was creating a device that was so different from a regular controller, he felt like it was going to other people who used it. And that was important feedback for us. That was really vital. And while we did create a device that was very different from a regular controller, we took this into the development of it very seriously, and that we made sure that this felt like a modern Xbox device, that it was part of the family. And we've heard a lot from people in the community about this, and we're very happy about how they felt about the reception of this device. So it's been pretty cool. So you saw all those different people that we took into consideration when we made this device. Beyond all those individuals, the one thing that we kept seeing again and again with the charities was that we kept seeing there were caregivers in the background. There were people who were in the lives of the people that they help. And one of the things that we recognized really early on was that these caregivers often have to learn a lot of technology that they will never use, right? And that's really a trip. When you buy a piece of assistive technology, you can spend a ton of money, and to get that value, the companies that make those devices are going to try to shove as much features into it as they can so that you feel like you're getting value for this money. And then what happens, we saw again and again, was that caregivers are so overwhelmed with all the stuff that they got going on in their lives that they never went past the default settings anyway. They didn't bother to read the manual, and that's totally understandable. So one of the important things with this device is you can see in the back there's 19 ports, so one for every of the 17 buttons plus 2 extra ones. And the reason why we have 19 ports is bizarrely enough for simplicity. Because we wanted to get to a place where if a caregiver wanted to remap a button from say A to X, all they had to do was plug it in, unplug it from A and plug it into X, and they were done. And they didn't have to go to any software remapping, and they didn't have to do any sort of high-end configuration. They could just unplug something and plug it in. That was super important to us. So I want to get a little bit, I'm going to go quickly because I think I'm falling a little behind here. When we designed the device, it was super important. People like to see this stuff too. These are some of the sketches from Chris Kajowski, who's the industrial designer. So you can see some of the earlier models that we had were a little bit kind of boxy. We had some of the buttons in the middle, which turned out to be a little bit problematic. We wanted to see how we thought about how the buttons were actually designed. This is an early PolyJet 3D print where we had the buttons in the middle. And then we had them on the other side from where they are. Those both turned out to be problematic for kind of a number of reasons. When we were working on this project really early on, we were primarily thinking about it as a hub and not as a device that you would use a lot. Honestly, that's where we were at. And when we worked with Craig Hospital, they really hammered into our heads that this is an early PolyJet. You can see it's really square. They were like, if someone rests their hands on the edge of this device, they're going to hurt themselves, right? So you have to slope that, you have to do something about it. And we couldn't make the back any thinner because that's how much space we needed for the plugs, but we could slope the front. So we sloped the front so that you can rest your hands on the table and you don't actually have to reach up to hit the buttons. So it's much more natural. It was part of the ergonomics of this device. This is pretty close to the final layout. Some of the really interesting things about this and the intentionality of it is this idea that, so hopefully you can see, that your hand can kind of fit between the two buttons and you can rock it back and forth, so that if you don't have a lot of movement, you can do a simple motion to at least hit 2 buttons. And I mean, again, just like Brad in that with his head array, with his 2 buttons, if you can hit 2 buttons, you can kind of play a game with someone. So we kind of wanted to make sure that we optimized for that. When we were doing our visits to Craig Hospital, it's a fairly new facility. It's in Denver. And we noticed that everywhere there was scuffs on the walls and scratches in the elevators. And we kind of were like, well, what's that? And basically what happens is that when you go there, you're either recently injured and you're basically a new wheelchair user. So you're driving around in this power chair and you're hitting a lot of stuff because you're not good at it. You're a new power chair driver. So you're running into walls and all kinds of stuff. And that was actually really important to us because we knew we wanted to make mounting on the device. So on the bottom of the device, you can mount it. So there's a standard tripod mount, but we also put in something that's much more heavy duty. And we actually ended up building the chassis of this device around this mount, just in case someone had it mounted to their chair and they ran into a wall. Yeah. So let's get back to this. So you can kind of see where we're coming from, right? One of the things that when we finally got around to this idea of, that our traditional controller was the exclusion, we had a lot of engineers basically keep asking us, what's the primary use case of this new device you're creating? And to be honest, it stumped us for a really long time. We couldn't answer that question in a way that satisfied them. And eventually we got to a point where we said, well, the primary use case for game controllers is this one, is the one that millions of people use already. This is the primary use case. This needs to be all the alternate use cases. This needs to fill in all those gaps that that first one kind of misses. And so that's how we approached it. So when I say please don't design for this, I tell game developers, I don't want you to design for this. I want you to think about simpler controls or different types of controls, because we're heading to a world where game development and input from people is not one thing. You might think of your game as a mouse and keyboard game, but someone's going to play it with a controller, and then some kid's going to figure out a way to hack it so that they can play it on a phone, and you're going to be like, I never thought about playing this on a phone, right? So input is becoming fluid. And so it's important for us to think about how we can make our input fluid. So this is what I ask people instead. I'm not a big fan of giving prescriptive guidance. I've been a designer for 20 years. I hate when people tell me what to design. I'd rather have people tell me what the problem is. So I don't really like giving prescriptive guidance. Earlier today, the game accessibility guidelines were mentioned, and Ian's work is wonderful. Oh, he says hi, by the way. So he told me to tell you that. Ian's guidelines are really great. I would actually suggest you look at them, but I'm not a big fan of prescriptive guidance. So these are the questions I want to ask people instead. Can your control remapping be as unique as your gameplay? What unique game assists can tune your gameplay for individuals? Would secondary action facilitators hurt gameplay? Can you have fun with simple controls, but not necessarily compete? And I think that's an important one for folks, because I think in this room, we think that compete and fun are the same thing. It's not. Just remember, people can have fun and not be good at your game. They can still have fun with it. Is precision vital to progression? Are simultaneous actions required? This is my one prescriptive one. Please don't make finger gymnastics, right? Of pressing 3 buttons at the same time. That really does hurt a lot of people. QuickTime events are the worst for people with disabilities. It's just really hard. Can inaccurate timing be forgiven, or can it be flexible? So you're probably wondering what all that means. So let's go to some examples. So this is Minecraft. Minecraft has some great control remapping. It gives you options to choose not only kind of what everything is on the controller, what you can remap whatever to, but there's some really good kind of assists. One of my favorite assists in Minecraft is auto jump. I don't have to press A to go up a hill. I don't have to go A, right? That's the kind of thing that we kind of talk about. Does that kind of facilitator actually hurt your gameplay, right? Let's look at some Fortnite. Fortnite has some great accessibility options in their menu, in their accessibility menu, but I'm not going to talk about any of those. I'm going to talk about this one that they have, which is in their control options menu, which is sprint by default. I do not have to press that left stick to run. I am always running. That's great. That's an amazing option for them, and for people I know that play Fortnite, that is one less button that they have to press. I'm not much of a FIFA guy. I don't know if there are people in here that are. Unlike millions of people in the world who are huge FIFA people. FIFA has some great simple controls that they've had for a really long time that allow you to play FIFA with just 2 buttons. It's 2-button mode in FIFA. What's really cool is that in 2019, they actually added a 1-button mode. They also have some really great assists here. We've all seen FIFA. I'm gonna skip ahead. 1 joystick, 2 buttons inside. Inside's a wonderful example of how you can have a dynamic, engaging game. I'm not very good. I forgot this part. And I'm like, oh yeah, the box. So Inside's a great example of what simple controls can be and how you can still have a really engaging game with just some really minimal controls. So this is my youngest daughter, and she's in the Inclusive Tech Lab, and she's playing Rocket League on a setup that we have there for people, which we call like Rocket League with no hands. And we create this setup so that people can get an understanding of playing games in a way that is different, but yet still approachable. So this setup basically is she steers with her knees. There's 2 buttons there. Think of those as like just 2 right and left on a D-pad that she's got with her knee. And then she's got that Rock Band pedal on the floor that she's using to accelerate. So that's the basic controls of the game. And you can see that there's a little rod that's kind of on her head. That's an actual button. That's a jump button. So that's the setup that we basically use to tell people, to introduce people to this idea of, can you still have fun in this game without actually mastering it, right? So she can't boost, she can't slide, she can't do a whole bunch of other stuff that in the game, but she can have fun. Rocket League also has some really amazing, oh, did I miss it? No, I did. Rocket League has some amazing remapping controls that are really contextual. It lets you remap acceleration to stick movement, which is really cool, because it's very possible to play Rocket League with just a joystick and nothing else. So it's quite awesome. This is Way of the Passive Fist. This is a great game. They did a ton of work with the accessibility community. Hey, Sightless, did they talk to you? All right. Yeah. They're still good people. Yeah, it's really neat because like they tune this game so much so that there's a lot of sliders in there. And sliders are really important to our work. We don't like to think in absolutes. We like to basically give people options. So you can see that you can adjust all of the things like enemy strength and combo mastery and resourcefulness along a slider, which is really kind of cool. Another thing that they did in their game, which I actually just recently found out, is they let you remap buttons to right stick movement, which is really cool. So instead of like button mashing ABXY, you can just use the right stick to hit those buttons. And this is the first game that I'm aware of that actually did this. Now this is an idea that was given to me a long time ago by a guy named Wheels, who Sightless might know. He's a competitive KI player. Different than him. But Wheels has muscular dystrophy. So he's this idea of like using a stick to hit buttons because it's less movement is really very powerful. He just doesn't want to do all the travel to go to all those buttons all the time. If he had one thing that he could keep his finger on, it would be much more powerful for him. Oh, we have to talk about Celeste. I really appreciate that the designers of Celeste did not want to put in assist mode, but they did it anyway. They recognized that their vision was to not have assist mode, but that some people might need it. And so they put it in. And so some of the options you can see in assist mode is you can turn the game speed all the way from 100% down to 10. You can have infinite stamina on and off. You can have set numbers of air dashes and this idea of invincibility. And this really opens up this story for people who are who might not be able to play the game as they designed it. Now, they designed a punishingly hard game, but they wanted people to experience the story, so they put in assists so that people with limited mobility and other types of cognitive differences like processing challenges could play this game. A lot of the time, that's what we see with people with processing challenges is that, oh, now it's really bright. For me, not for you. Is that they don't want the Dead Souls boss to be easier to kill. They just want more time. They just want him to be a little slower, right? So it's not always about difficulty. Sometimes it's about speed. So kind of back to that idea of like, what are the sliders that you can put in your game to make sure that you give people the options they need to be able to play? This is Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider also put in some wonderful accessibility features in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I particularly like being able to aim with my left stick and not my right. And the fact that instead of repeated button presses, I can just do taps or holds. I think that's really important. Again, that whole idea of button mashing sometimes is really the barrier for a lot of folks. All right. So back to this. I don't have an example for all these, but let's talk through them. Can control remapping be as unique as your gameplay? Way of the Passive Fist, Rocket League. You know, I want to make these controls remapping unique. It's not about system remapping. One of the things we talk about a lot in the gaming accessibility community is that in-game control remapping is always superior to system remapping. Now, as someone who basically has designed system remapping for Xbox, I will say our system remapping is as robust as we can, but it always should be a safety net for the player. So we still encourage people to put in-game remapping. And the sort of the way that I hope people can take this and actually be excited about doing in-game remapping is, can you come up with ways to create unique types of remapping that are very specific for your game, like that are uniquely yours? What unique gameplay assists can tune your gameplay for individuals? Celeste is, you know, Celeste was the king of this. There's also good examples from FIFA. We have a decent example in Forza Motorsport. It's very possible to play Forza Motorsport with just pressing a button. You can turn on the auto steering and the auto braking. And we actually have a number of individuals that like to play Forza Motorsport by just pressing the button. So if that's all the capacity you have, we have a few little kids that we basically get sent letters where their ability is to only sort of press a big button, like that big red one that you see out there in the hallway. And they can play Forza Motorsport, and that's everything to them. That they can actually actively play a game as opposed to passively watch life. Secondary action facilitators hurt gameplay. Minecraft auto jump. All the various stuff like that happened in like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, like the puzzle accelerators. They're really cool. Have fun with simple controls, but not necessarily compete. Rocket League, it's a great example. It's one we refer to all the time. Same Minecraft a little bit too. Is precision vital to progression? I don't really have an example for that one, but I'm pretty sure you folks get it. Like, how precise do you have to be to actually make sure that you can get past something, right? And you'll have to balance this in your own games. I'm not trying to be prescriptive, but, you know, think of that as a barrier. Please don't make people press multiple buttons at the same time to progress. And can inaccurate timing be forgiven? Celeste is really the greatest example of that. That idea of being able to change how the timing works is really vital. So, I hope that was helpful. That's where you can find me on Twitter. I'm Bryce J. I'm happy to answer questions and tell you about the controller. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. stepping on the cord. Are there any questions? I can't see. No? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's been some research, some experiments regarding reading brainwaves.
Yeah.
Is it even possible to actually have like precise control using this technology, or is it like too soon, or is it impossible?
Well, I don't want to say it's impossible. And I mean, this is one of those things that's so far off. Like Satya basically said, yeah, we're looking into it, and it's like, yeah, we're looking into it. You know, right now, I don't think it's very, like you said, the precision is not there. One of the things that I think is really interesting, though, about stuff like that is secondary actions. So there's a comedian who has cerebral palsy named Zach Anner. And we gave him an adaptive controller, and one of the games that he wanted to play was Red Dead Redemption, the original one. This was before the new one came out. And in Red Dead Redemption, you hit a button to have your horse gallop. So what he did, because he thought this was hilarious, because he's a comedian, and it was hilarious, was that we gave him a button that basically would fire when he hit a certain decibel level, right? So he would basically go, yeah, and his horse would run. You know, and it was hilarious. But what he found really quickly was that he couldn't go, yeah, yeah, like for an hour. He couldn't do that for an hour. His voice was going to go raw. But what that kind of showed us was this idea of what are the things that are not so crucial in your game. So there's a great charity up in Canada called Makers Making Change. One of their techs hooked up an Amazon Echo to if this then that went down to an Arduino that fired buttons on the controller. And he's got a demo of it. So what he does is he basically has voice commands for the controller. Now that's not going to work for like the precision twitchy stuff, but it will work for reload. It will work for pause. It will work for like going through like kind of supplementary events. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, yes, we're looking into it. Yes, it's far off, you know, like people are talking about it. I can't wait till we get there. But I also really know that the reason why these are buttons and not touchpads is there's something really satisfying about a tactile click, right? And we hear that again and again from people that even if we give them something that is probably better for their ability, they want to press the button. they want that click. They just kind of need it. So that's a cool question. Thank you. Yeah.
With your reference to the whole sort of decibel level being used to activate a button, I did think about hooking up a mic to the right trigger and just picking up and go, fire!
Yeah.
But I wasn't entirely sure how to do that. Does any of the documentation sort of indicate how to do that? So how the documentation?
Yeah. Well, the buttons themselves on the back. Well, a mic won't recognize them. Won't be recognized though. So the 3.5mm ports. That's a good feature request though. Thank you. Free consulting again. You know, the 3.5mm port is just the standard that the assistive technology community uses. You could take an old set of earbuds. This is a switch is the simplest piece of electronics in the world. It's a normally open switch. You could take a pair of headphones, split the wires, plug it in, touch the wires together. It would complete the circuit, and the button would fire. Right? That's all switches are. So if you wanted to create it, like the switch that we gave Zach was actually one from One Switch. It's called a shout box, where you can tune those electronics to have it fire a switch. And the firing the switch part is actually the simplest part of that equation. It's more just the reading the decibel level. But yeah, I mean, that's really interesting stuff that I think we need to look in a lot more. Cool. And we had a question here. Yeah, I mean, I get this question a lot. I'm going to sort of paraphrase like kind of what you're saying. you're concerned that if you put in too many assists, it's going to sort of.
My question is, if it's they are people with disabilities,
Mhm.
they are okay with that behind those
So they might be okay with it. I'm not okay with it. And let me just put, and don't get me wrong, like, I get a lot of people who ask me, can I plug a mouse into this thing? And the first thing I tell them is no, because that would be a vector that I would be putting into like a very sort of tenuous esports industry where like I'm providing someone with a competitive advantage that is not warranted. So I understand that as game designers, you have the mechanics and the sort of ecosystem to balance in your games. I totally get it. I am always going to be the guy that's advocating for more people to have more options. That FIFA 2 button mode that I was telling you about, they don't allow online play with it, which is silly because I don't know why they're doing it. They're either doing it, there's only two reasons. I should ask. They either think that people are going to have an unfair competitive advantage with just such simple controls, which I doubt. Like, have you ever played 2-button FIFA? It feels like my feet are in concrete. You know, I think the other advantage is they're babysitting people because they don't want people to go online and be like trounced by normal FIFA players. And frankly, that's not their call to make. You know, like, well, I guess it is. It's their game, but they shouldn't be making that call. They shouldn't be making that decision on behalf of their players. I will tell you, as the Xbox guy, we know that this is important to get game developers. So I'm never going to put anything in this thing that gives anyone a competitive advantage. As far as what you're talking about, if disabled people are okay with it, I think some are, but I don't know if that's the right way we should kind of going forward. We shouldn't think about it like that way. But I hear you. You have to balance your game. Yeah, you could always ask about your game. Yeah. Any more questions? Any in the back? No? All right, well, thank you so much. I'm around for today. I'm not here tomorrow, I'm afraid. But I would love to talk with folks. Thanks.